Okay, so I did talk about this already. I kind of got ahead of myself without realizing it. The only other thing I will state with regard to late fees, other than make sure you're filling this all out and make sure you have your dates correct, is late fees have to be reasonable in New Jersey. Okay, there's no hard and fast rule on what reasonable is, but you will see here if you are in multiple states, you'll see some lease agreements through NAA that have multiple late fees. Maybe one, on the 5th, and then some $1 a day after that. I've seen it where you have one on the 5th and you have a second one on a certain date. That's the reason why that doesn't exist on the New Jersey NAA leases, because that is not reasonable and it's been held as unreasonable, and you're not going to get that in court. I have seen it where some judges are okay that you have 10% of the monthly rent in as your late fee. I have seen some judges state that that's not reasonable, especially if your rents are high. Usually a flat rate is okay, depending on what it is. Make sure that one of the things is it's not supposed to be a penalty. It's supposed to reimburse you for your administrative expenses and having to try and collect late rent. And so that's the argument that us attorneys need to make in court. So if your rent is, say, $2,000 a month and you are charging 10% and you have a $200 late fee, it's going to be very difficult to state that just because the rent's higher, you have higher administrative expenses in trying to collect it, because you really don't. You're making the same phone calls, you're sending the same letters. So that late fee needs to be reasonable. $50 I've seen is reasonable. I've seen cases where $100 has been deemed as reasonable, depending on the area, depending on the judge. So excuse me. So just be careful that, number one, that you're filling this out and you have the correct dates, but number two, that your late fee is reasonable. It's something that's looked at with a pretty close eye in New Jersey.